Hi guys, I'm Kasha. Welcome to our coffee times to talk about horror, and today I bring you my top 10, my favorite reads from 2024.
It's coffee time!
It is just so weird to me how we are at the end of 2024 and we are already looking forward to books and movies and things that are coming out next year. And every year I go back to my Goodreads and I take a look at the books that I have rated the highest, but I also take a look at which books still give me like an emotional response while I'm going through the list, and those are the ones that you're going to find in this video. Now, I originally wanted to make a top 10 without any particular order, but then I forgot one book and I felt bad to kick out one of the 10 that I already had on the list. So this is a list with actually 11 books. I know it's not, accurate because it should be a top 10, but I make the rules in this house and we are getting a top 11. What I have done, to be fair to the books, because these are all books that I have loved a lot and I own all of the books in physical form, so you know that I really love them and want to keep them for the collection. So I couldn't make a top 11 where I rank it from least to most favorite, because honestly they're all very different books as well and I don't think it's fair to do that. So what I have done is I have made a list in chronological order. So basically we're gonna start with the oldest favorite, moving forward to the last book that I literally just finished reading 2 days ago that has made it to the list. So without further ado, let's take a look at my top reads from 2024. I started the year with a new favorite, and that was A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson, and this is a YA mystery thriller. This is a book that I actually bought when it came out. I bought it for my Kindle and I never read it, and at some point I realized that I was probably missing out and I just needed to read the books, and that's what I did. I started the year reading the complete trilogy and the novella, and I really enjoyed the experience. Obviously my favorite one is this one, the first book, and I think the reason why I really enjoy this series is because it is very much, it feels like a true crime story, and I think it was really well executed. I love the mixed media aspect of the books and I really did enjoy Pip as a character. We all know she kind of changed her personality a little bit in book 3, and a lot of people, including myself, were not the biggest fans of that, but nevertheless I really enjoyed this series and it is a series that I would definitely reread. I really enjoy the character of Pip because even though she was kind and nice to people, she was also a very tough cookie. In her town, 5 years ago, Andy Bell was murdered and the person who did it was arrested. But Pip always had the feeling that the police might have arrested the wrong person. So she decides that it is her mission to figure out exactly what happened to Andy Bell and to see if the guy that was accused was actually the murderer or if the murderer is still out there. Using a school project as an excuse to investigate the case, she starts performing interviews. She goes to people that knew Andy Bell, that were kind of involved with the case, and tries to dig information. She even tries to get information from the police. This was a very engaging story and you're so invested. You feel like you are investigating the case yourself with Pip and you're trying yourself to figure out who did it. Even though this is a chunky book for being a YA, I felt like you could just fly through it, and it is one of those that has multiple twists that will keep you guessing. So if that's what you love and you still have not picked up this trilogy, please do so. When it comes to the TV show, what I will tell you is that I was very disappointed. I felt like the tone, the characters, there was something off about the TV show, so I think they're gonna get renewed for season 2, but nevertheless I was not the biggest fan of season 1. And we continue our list with yet another mystery thriller YA. We have Catch Your Death by Ravina Gron. And I decided to include this one on my favorites because this is another one that has multiple twists. It will keep you guessing, and I'm almost guaranteed that you're not gonna figure out the plot twist in this one because it was that well done. It's also a book that is atmospheric, has different POVs, and it was done so well. Plus, on top of all of that, this is a true locked room murder mystery like Agatha Christie, and we read this one for Amy's YA book club. We had a full discussion about the book on a live, and it was a book that I really enjoyed reading and the experience of reading it with people, and I think that's why it has become one of my favorites. We have 3 girls that find themselves stranded in the middle of winter, in the middle of a snowstorm, and they all end up in the same house. It is an isolated mansion in the middle of nowhere that belongs to a rich family, and the family is also, of course, inside. The girls decide to go in, take shelter, and things take a turn when at the family dinner, the matriarch is poisoned. So now they're all trapped inside of the mansion with a killer. Who did it, who had motive, who had opportunity. So the story is told from the perspective of the 3 girls that have to seek shelter in this mansion, and they are trying to figure out who's the killer before more people end up dead. The characters in this book are introduced in such a fun way. They're basically introduced through interviews that they have with the police because, of course, they're going to be investigated after, you know, the snowstorm is over and the police finds out that a murder has been committed in this mansion. I thought the different POVs were so well done. You could tell the girls apart very easily. The way that it was written, you knew which character was talking, and that is not something easy to do. We will get to know the story from the 3 girls' point of view, and we will know the before they get to the mansion, the during the murder, and the aftermath of the murder and their investigation. So there is a lot of things that happen in this book, but every time you get to the end of a chapter, you just need to keep going because you just need to know what's going to happen next. So when it comes to the tension building and keeping you at the edge of your seat, this is a masterclass on that. You have some family drama, especially rich people family drama. You have 3 girls that are very different, but they have found themselves now in the same situation, and they're gonna have to put any kind of differences that they have aside to try to find out who is targeting people in that mansion. Solving the mystery in this one is so much fun, and I think if you love this type of locked room murder mysteries, Agatha Christie type of books, and you've never read this book, it has to be on your list for 2025. Our next book is a book that caught me off guard, and I was in the middle actually of a reading vlog, and you guys got to experience my love, my addiction to this book, and that is An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson. This is more fantasy than horror, but it does have vampires. Interestingly enough, this is also a dark academia book, which they don't tend to be my absolute favorites, but this one was a 5 out of 5 for me. I think it's the fact that we had vampires in a dark academia setting that did things to me. Even though vampirism is not the main theme in the book, it's not like all the time present, it's not all the time what we're talking about here, I think it was a very interesting way of approaching vampires. And of course we have here the question of all questions. What would you be willing to do for those that you love? The book is a sapphic retelling of Carmilla, and we follow the point of view of 2 girls that are attending the same private boarding school. This is a very prestigious school. So Carmilla, she has money and she has paid her tuition and she is used to this lifestyle. Laura is someone that is in the school because of a grant that she received. She comes from a poor family and she's not used to, you know, prestigious boarding schools. They end up in the same class and Carmilla starts to be a little bit jealous of Laura, and Laura has a crush on Carmilla. So this combo is already chef's kiss. The way the relationship between Camila and Laura has like this beautiful evolution throughout the book, and it's kind of like a slow burn of a story. I think it was just so well done, and it is a book that is very addictive. I could not put this book down. The moment I put it down, I had to pick it up again. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't leave, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. All I thought about was, I want to go back to my book. I need to know what happens next. This is a book I'm definitely going to reread, and it's also a book that I'm trying to find in a special edition because it has been one of my favorites, obviously. The next one is the only book in this list that is not a horror book. It's actually fantasy. We have The House on the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Cloon. This is a book that I had on my list because I had heard that it was very cozy, very good, and I was like, you know what, I do like the trope of, you know, kids that have special powers in a school for like peculiar children, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna give it a go. And I was also not ready for this book emotionally. And I didn't know the attachment, the bond that I was gonna get with the characters. I was obsessed. And book 2 just came out and I need to pick it up and read it, but this has been another one of my favorites. So much so that I owned this book in paperback, and I actually sold the paperback and got myself the hardcover because one of my favorites. It's one of those books that is going to make you so happy, but at the same time is going to emotionally rip you apart and destroy you. So those are my favorite kind. Linus lives alone with his cat. He's on his 40s and he works for the government. He goes to different orphanages where there's kids with special powers, and he goes there to make sure that the, you know, rooms are nice, that the kids are being taken care of, that there is no danger for the kids, or that the kids are not a danger to society. So his work is basically to go to different places to check how they are taking care of the kids with the special powers. However, the new assignment that he got was going to change his life forever because he met Arthur in this house here, the House of the Cerulean Sea, where you can only reach by boat and then by this cute bus. So it is very isolated from society, and that is because they have a very special kid in this place. I love how Linus is basically a Virgo. He wants to follow the rules. He's very OCD about everything. And Arthur is more relaxed, more happy-go-lucky, you know, enjoy life, let the kids be kids a little bit. And the contrast between the two was just lovely. Even though the storyline in itself is quite simple and straightforward, I love the dialogues, you know, the conversation between the characters. I love the writing style. It did feel like a warm hug. Like, that is the best way I could describe this book, and another book that I will gladly reread anytime. We go back to mystery thrillers, but this time we have an adult mystery thriller, and that is The Gathering by CJ Tutor, and this one has been my favorite by her so far, possibly because it is another isolated setting, and it's also winter snowstorm with vampires. This one gave me a little bit, you know, 30 Days of Night kind of vibe, and it was just so atmospheric and so good, and it was at the same time a very different take on vampires, and that really worked for me. You had the vampire themed, but you also had like a proper detective murder mystery investigation, and I love that combination. This book explores humanity and how quickly we judge others and believe the things that we have been told, especially things that have been told through generations because they should be true, right? It's also about how people judge very quickly the things that they don't understand or things that they are not familiar with, and it addresses, you know, the topic, will we be able to overcome our differences, or will we kill each other first? One of both, mostly. We are in an Alaska town and a kid has been murdered. The town is convinced that it was the vampire, so the government decides to send a detective called Barbara, and she is an expert on vampire kills, so they think that if anybody is going to be able to solve the case, it's going to be her. I also love that she's already a 50-year-old woman, and we don't always get characters of her age in this type of mystery mystery thrillers, especially not females. I feel like there's a lot more older men that are detectives in this type of mystery thrillers, but the women always tend to be younger. The story is told through multiple POVs, and the point of the book is obviously to figure out who killed the kid. Was it really a vampire, or was it something or someone else? We do get to learn a little bit about the vampire, the colony, their past, the history that they have with humans, the fights that they had with humans in the past, which was so interesting to me. I kind of wish we would have learned a lot more about those vampires. But I think somebody mentioned that this book might potentially get a sequel, or we might see Barbara the detective return, so I would definitely love to see more of this world. One of my favorite things in vampire books, and I always say it, is to discover how they work, how their colonies work. They're, you know, do they have like a leader? How can we kill them? Like, to learn about all the lore, because depending on the books it might be different. So this book offers also some twists and turns to the story, like any good thriller would, and I definitely recommend it if you like atmospheric winter, small town, isolated due to a snowstorm, you know the vibe. So this has been so far my favorite by CJ Tutor, and I have read all her books. Moving on to the next book, and I wanted to include this one in this list because this is a book that I thought I was not gonna enjoy, and I ended up loving it. I was like, how am I loving this book so much? And that is Diabola by Jennifer Thorne. I had mixed feelings going into the book because I had seen many people in Goodreads saying that it was boring, that it was not good, and I'm like, should I read it, should I not? But this cover compelled me to buy the book. Also, Amazon had an offer for €7, and I'm like, you know what, let me give it a go. And when I started reading this book, I found myself immersed in this story. I was addicted, and the third act, wild, like book wild, unexpected, loved it. This is probably one of the best slow burn horror books that I have ever read, because all the slow burning that you get in the beginning in all the stories and things and the character relationships and everything, it all has a purpose. It all makes sense in the third act, and the way that we start very slow and at some point we start to take up the tempo, and it just ends up in an apocalyptic way. Unexpected. Honestly, 10 out of 10. So Anna is our main character, and she hates family vacations, not because of, you know, going somewhere for a holiday or whatever. It's because she doesn't like to spend much time with her family. She considers herself the black sheep of the family. They're always making her annoying questions because she's single, all of that. And she's not looking forward to time with her family. But she decides to go to the vacation, and this year they are going to Italy, and they rent a beautiful house, and the house has a lot of history, but they don't know it yet, but they are going to discover it soon enough. In the house that they are staying, Anna at some point feels like she's seeing shadows and things that move in the dark. She feels like it might be her imagination, it might be just the night, you know, the moonlight, the shadows. She tries not to obsess too much about it until things start to escalate. As we get to know the family, you know, the horror elements start to creep in, like the noises, the shadows, and like I said at the beginning, it's very kind of soft, and just like here a little bit of creepiness and there a little bit of that, and at some point it just takes off. And I hope you guys are ready for the ride because the ending was wild. I think this is a book that might be for people that enjoy Rachel Harrison's books. I feel like they have a little bit of the same vibe of that atmospheric, creepy horror that at some point takes a turn for something that you didn't expect. And I ended up loving it so much, and it's even made it to my top list of 2024. Imagine it is a book that I was like, I don't know if I should even bother buying it because it's probably gonna be bad. And then I loved it. So this also gets to show you sometimes other people's reviews might be completely different from what you are going to experience. That is why I always say when I review a book and I say it's not for me, but it might be for you, because many people didn't like this book and I loved it. So it's all very subjective at the end of the day. Next we have one of my absolute favorite books of 2024. and that is We Used to Live Here by Marcus Cleaver. And this book was robbed in the Goodreads Choice Awards. It was robbed. Like, I love Stephen King. You guys know I love Stephen King, but I don't think every year he always has the best book. I don't agree with that. Even though I love Stephen King, I buy his books every year, I read his books every year, but I think this was the best horror book of 2024. So this book was robbed. And I bought this book because I read somewhere about this thriller that was going to be adapted on Netflix, whatever, which I don't know the status of that at the moment. But that's why I decided to pick it up, and because the story sounded really good. And again, Amazon had an offer, I think for 11 euros for the hardcover, and I'm like, let's give it a go. Now the cover looks like a regular thriller, but it's horror. It's pure horror. We follow a young couple, Eve and Charlie, and these two girls, they love to flip houses. So they buy houses that are beautiful but need some renovation. They spend some time in the house to fix everything, repaint it, etc., fix everything, and then they resell the houses. But this time, they have bought a house in a different area where normally they wouldn't. And things are gonna be different this time around. One day, somebody shows up at the door, and it is a father, a guy, that says that he would like to come into the house to show his family the house where he grew up in. And he seems to be very kind and everything, and our main character, she's one of those people pleasers, and she cannot say no, and she ended up allowing the family to go in to just walk a little bit around the house. Eve thought this was going to be a quick visit and the family would be out of the house before Charlie returns. However, the family is not leaving. And on top of that, one of them goes missing inside of the house and they cannot find that person. And after that, I cannot tell you anything else because this book is going to take you into such a wild ride. I have said before that this book reminded me a little bit to House of Leaves because of that weirdness, unsettling feeling that it's going to give you, uncomfortable feeling, awkward. And I love this book so much. The chapters are very short and they are very tension filled. And when you end up a chapter, you just are almost scared to keep going because it's really gonna keep you at the edge of your seat. This is definitely one of the books that while I was reading it, I was feeling the creepiness. I was feeling uncomfortable reading it. I was scared to keep going. I was confused. I was scared. I don't know. It took me through the trenches, and it has been one of my favorite books of the year for sure. I mean, this book touches something that I think everybody is absolutely terrified of, which is having strangers in your house. Especially you invite them in because you are just too nice, which, you know, was the first mistake, but once they're in, they don't leave. So having strangers in your house and being unable to kick them out, it's a real fear. This is a very unique psychological horror. It is a mindfuck, and it might not work for everybody, obviously, as House of Leaves also didn't work for everybody. It's not as complicated to read as House of Leaves. It doesn't have footnotes that have footnotes. It doesn't have all the weird stuff that House of Leaves has, but it gave me the same weird, uncomfortable feeling. We are going back to YA for our next book. We have Lie or Die by AJ Clark. And this is another one that I didn't expect to love so much because honestly, even though there's a lot of YA books that I really love and I gave 4 or 4.5 as a rating, there is not many YA books that I have given 5 stars to, and this is one of them. It is another book that I was so addicted to, I couldn't put it down. I just wanted to know what was gonna happen next, and I think part of it is because this formula really worked. The book is basically Big Brother meets a game of mafia. So we have a bunch of teenagers that are participating in this experiment where they are going to enter a house similar to Big Brother. They are going to be recorded and monitored for the whole game, and when they are inside, they're all gonna play the game of Mafia. They are going to go one by one into a room, and they're going to be told if they are Mafia, if they are not, and there's a lot of other rules that are going to be explained in the book, and you can feel the tension of the characters, you can feel the mistrust and knowing that anybody can be lying to you at any point, because obviously everybody wants to win the game of Mafia because there is a big cash prize. That is why you should trust no one. And actually, when the game starts and they start playing the game of Mafia, they realize that when the contestants are eliminated from the game, they might actually be killed for real and not just eliminated as in pack your bags and go. They might be actually killed and disposed of. So now the remaining players are like, what the hell? Is this for real? Are they killing people? How do we ask for help? We are trapped inside of this house. We are being watched. And it is such a good tension-filled thriller, and it is also bloody. And I loved it. You can read this book in one sitting, and one of the things that I really loved about this book is that I felt like I was inside of the house. I felt like I was playing with them. I had the feeling that I knew these people. I was rooting for them. I was scared for them. I was so invested. Like, I felt I was in there watching them and watching them play this possibly murderous game. At times it can be corny, yeah, because some of the players know each other and some of the players might like each other, but honestly, this has been, I think, one of my favorite YA books that I have ever read, just because I was just so addicted to it. Like, honestly, 10 out of 10 would recommend. The next book is a book that honestly I didn't know if I should include it in this list or not, because it doesn't come out until 2025, but I did read it this year, and that is Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. This is the slipcover from the beautiful ARC that I received by the publisher, and this is another book that caught me off guard. I feel like most of the books in this list have that common denominator. Basically, my favorite books have been books that have shocked me, surprised me, unexpectedly made me love them, and this is one of them. I have read almost all of Grady Hendrix's works so far that he has published, and I always felt like I really enjoyed his books, but they were never like a 5-star for me until this one, until we got to this one. And Grady Hendrix is an author that I'm always going to support. It's an auto-buy author for me, and I did not expect this book to almost make me cry by the end of the book, because I'm used to the Grady Hendrix that it's all fun and games, you know, comedy horror kind of vibe, but this one was his most serious work to date. I do have a spoiler-free review of the book if you want to hear my more in-depth thoughts about it. The book is set in the 70s, and we follow teenage girls that have fallen pregnant out of wed, and they are ashamed for their families, and the families decide to send them to this school where basically they're gonna stay until they give birth, and they're gonna take the baby away, and then they can't return home. And it is absolutely horrifying, the idea of putting underage teenage girls that are already scared because they are pregnant, they don't know what to do, they don't know how birth is going to be, and they are being separated from their families, they're being sent to some home, not knowing what's going to happen to them, scared, knowing that they have to give up their baby. It's absolutely horrifying, and this is something that has happened in the past. It is historical fiction, and it's also something that might still happen in some places and we're just not aware of. So I really appreciated that Grady Hendrix gave a voice to these stories, and it turned it into a horror story, but also there are some positive things that come out of this, and some positives when it comes to reclaim your power. Our main character here is Fern. She's 15 years old, and her father drives her to this place, leaves her there, But Fern is very determined to try to help the other girls that are in the school that are as scared as she is. Even though witchcraft, it is something that doesn't appear in the book until I would say the 20% mark or so. When it does come up, I think it was such a good way to integrate witchcraft in a book based in the 70s. I think Grady Hendrix was very smart and he knows the tropes as well, very well. And this was a book about witches that was very different because the witches in this book felt a little bit like hippies in a way. And that is so fitting for the 70s. There is also like a physical book for witches with spells and everything, and that's all I'm going to tell you about that. But I loved to hear the story about these girls. At times I was angry. At times I just wanted to scream. I just wanted to punch people. But I think the anger is something that the author wanted to get out of the reader, because the situation that these girls are in is something that you should be mad about. The book talks about the struggles of being a female, but also the things that you can do with your own power if you're willing to pay the cost. I am so excited that we are almost in January and people are gonna be able to get this book and read it, because it has been my favorite by Grady Hendrix and definitely one of my favorites of 2024. I have 2 more books for you, and these are books that I have recently read, so maybe you have heard me talking about them already in the recent videos, but one of the last books that I have to show you is Dead of Winter by Darcy Coates. I know. I've talked a lot about this book. I know I've made a lot of people buy this book, but you're all welcome because it was great. This is a mystery thriller that is on an isolated location in the middle of a snowstorm, and it's also another one of those that it's kind of like a locked room murder mystery, kind of like Agatha Christie. You can tell that I love those kind of tropes because there are many books on my list about people trapped places. I love to see people suffer when they are trapped somewhere and they have no way to call for help. That I'm a maniac like that. In this book, we follow a group of people that are on their way to a beautiful lodge in the middle of the mountains, and they are all there in order to kind of, you know, disconnect from civilization. There's barely any internet connection in this lodge, so they just want 2 weeks to kind of recharge their energies and be surrounded by nature. We have like a couple, like a young couple, we have an older couple, we have a father with his son, so everybody is coming there with family members or loved ones to spend 2 weeks just relaxing. However, as you might have already suspected, on the way to this lodge, the bus gets stuck, they cannot move forward, they have to get out of the bus, there is a snowstorm that starts, and they have no other choice but to look for cover, and they find an abandoned hunting cabin. They all gather inside and they're trying to come up with ideas on how to get out of there, because there is no internet connection, there is no way to call for help, nobody knows where they are because they were supposed to be in the lodge and not halfway through. So basically they are incommunicated, isolated, alone. On top of that, the next morning the group wakes up to find somebody has been murdered in the middle of the night while they were sleeping. And just like that, one by one, the people in this group are gonna be picked by a killer, by something or someone that is killing them one by one, and they have to figure out who is behind the kills before literally everybody dies. This book, it's another one that you can read in just one sitting, and it's perfect for people that love to try to figure out who is the killer in books, because all the characters are introduced and they explain what they do for a living, where they come from, and then as people are being killed one by one, and Darcy Coates is very smart because she always plays suspicion in almost every single character so that it is not so easy for you, the reader, to figure out who is behind all of it. I think I figured out the ending, but it was kind of like already 70% into it, I think, so not fairly early or anything like that. But even though I did predict some stuff, I love this book so much. Every time I would get to the end of a chapter, I wanted to keep going because somebody else had just died, and I'm like, so now what do we do? You know, like, okay, let me see now who could then be if it's not this person, because obviously that person is now dead. So it is very engaging. As a reader, I love books that keep me entertained and engaged, and books that when I put them down, I want to return to immediately because I want to keep reading and knowing what's going on. The deaths in this book were a lot gorier than I had anticipated, which was A+ for me. And this is my second book by Darcy Coates. The only other book I had read by her was a typical ghost haunted house story, which I also really enjoyed, but this is going to be one that I would also gladly reread at some point to see the crumbs that Darcy Coates was leaving for people to figure out the clues. The last book that I have on my list is a book that I literally finished a couple of days ago, and I really enjoyed this book as I had anticipated, because the author is someone that never lets me down, and that is Rotten Tommy by David Sodergren. I really wanted to read this before the year ended, and I managed to read this one already in the month of December, so I decided it has to go straight to my list because more people need to read this book. David Sodergren can do no wrong in my book. Yeah, his books are very violent and gory, and some of them are truly messed up, but I love it. So keep in mind, this book is very intense with the gore and the body parts and the eyeballs and things like that. Very violent, very gory, so putting it out there. It's a little bit kind of like Richard Lehman, you know, the vibe. So that's why I love David Sodergren so much, because he really pushes boundaries every time, everywhere. 40 years ago, Becky's mom disappeared without a trace. Now Becky is renovating her childhood home when the workers find 3 VHS tapes in a hole inside of the walls. So thanks to the renovations, I guess, she finds these 3 VHS tapes. Obviously, she doesn't have a VHS player, so she has to go somewhere to convert the video so she can watch them. And when she watches the first video, she realizes that this looks like a really weird, almost like a kid's program, but really messed up and dark. And at some point, she also sees an image of her mom. She's a little bit scared of what these tapes mean, and she's trying to figure out why were these tapes hidden? Why were they inside of the walls? Why did her parents want to keep these tapes like sealed forever? And the more she investigates, the more people that start getting killed around her. And not just killed, just brutally murdered. Unfortunately for her, because she's in contact with all of these people, it almost seems like she's the one doing it. So she's gonna have to get to the bottom of things, to the bottom of these tapes, where they come from, why were they hidden, who is in those tapes, and try to figure everything out before it's too late, before more people are killed, before she looks worse and worse to the police. Now, a lot of people die in this book, and some people did deserve it. There are some people in this book that they are just pure evil characters, and those are the ones that you cannot wait until they get hell. That was very satisfying, very cathartic for me. I really love those death scenes, not gonna lie. When you have really bad people being brutally murdered, there is another level of satisfaction there. Now, this novel might traumatize you. It does go a little bit into childhood and kids programs, a little bit more into that kind of fantasy world that children live in, but it's meant to truly traumatize you. I read the first half of this book in just one sitting. I could not put it down. It has also short chapters, it's fast-paced. The horror is fantastic because the gore is just great and it's bloody. I really loved Becky as our main character. She has to go through the trenches, and you know, she's taking things a lot better than I would have if I would have been her. Sometimes she has to make decisions that are not easy, and I think this book is also a roller coaster. It's one of those books that starts kind of, well, I was gonna say mild, but actually one of the first kills is very brutal. But a bit mild when it comes to the horror elements apart from the kills, and it just starts to escalate, and the third act is just wild, buck wild, crazy. And that is also something that you can expect from David Sodergren. I feel like his stories sometimes start relatively mild for him, like The Forgotten Island, and then things start to escalate and escalate. So yeah, but this one, like I said, you have to love blood and gore and violent kills. And those were, you guys, my 11 favorite books that I read in 2024. I hope that you enjoyed to see my list and hear my thoughts on the books. It's also been fun to me to do it like from the beginning of the year to the end, to see, you know, what books I have been loving throughout the year. So I had a lot of fun doing it like this. I hope that you enjoyed the video. Let me know down below which is your top 5 favorite books that you have read in 2024. If they are not horror, it's fine. Just let me know which ones have worked for you the best. If you want to directly support me and the channel, please consider joining the Patreon. The link is down below. Thank you guys, as always, so much for your support, and I hope to see you all in the next coffee time. Bye!